In the year 2135, humanity had begun to explore the stars. After centuries of technological advancements and the unyielding curiosity that had always been a part of human nature, Earth's scientists and engineers had developed faster than light travel. This opened the doors to distant galaxies, where humanity made contact with alien species for the first time. Most of these encounters were peaceful, based on mutual curiosity and the excitement of discovering the unknown. But some were not so welcoming. One of the first alien species humanity encountered was the Zorath, a race of beings known for their advanced technology and aggressive nature. The Zorath were a species who believed in strength and superiority, and they viewed themselves as the rightful rulers of the galaxy. They were tall, their skin a shimmering metallic color, and their eyes glowed with an intense light that reflected their pride and power. To them, any species they deemed weak was destined for servitude or extinction. They had conquered many worlds, and their reputation preceded them wherever they went. When the Zorath's ambassador arrived on Earth, it was a historic moment. The leaders of Earth were hopeful that this meeting would be an opportunity to establish peace, a chance to forge relationships with a race so powerful. A delegation of humans, representing the nations of Earth, had prepared to meet the Zorath in a grand hall, located in one of the most secure locations on the planet. The Zorath ambassador, a towering figure named Vrax, stood in the center of the room, surrounded by his aides. His eyes scanned the humans gathered before him. The humans stood tall as well, their posture straight, showing a confidence that Vrax found almost amusing. The humans' expressions, however, were difficult to read. There was no fear in their eyes. Instead, there was something else, a quiet, unwavering confidence that the Zorath had not expected. "Welcome, Vrax," the human representative, General Cassandra Blake, said with a firm voice. She was a seasoned leader who had led Earth's military forces through years of peacekeeping missions on distant planets. Her eyes locked onto Vrax's, not in submission, but in mutual respect. The humans had learned long ago that showing weakness in front of the Zorath would not be tolerated. Vrax nodded, though he seemed indifferent to the greeting. "I have come to see if your species has truly earned the right to exist in this galaxy," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "We, the Zorath, have no patience for those who are weak, those who cannot defend themselves. Show me your strength, or I will leave this place with my judgment." The humans did not flinch. They had expected this. In fact, they had planned for it. General Blake raised an eyebrow, her calm demeanor betraying none of the nervousness that the Zorath had likely hoped to provoke. "We are not here to fight," she said. "We are here to show you what humanity can offer, to demonstrate that we are not just survivors, but innovators. We have strengths you have not yet seen." The Zorath ambassador scoffed, his glowing eyes narrowing. "I have seen all I need to see. You are small, fragile beings. You are no match for us." Blake smiled slightly, but it was not a smile of amusement. It was a smile that spoke of the confidence humanity had earned through centuries of struggle, adaptation, and resilience. She turned to her team, who were seated around the table, waiting for the right moment. The tension in the room was thick. The Zorath ambassador stood still, his arms crossed, convinced that humanity had no chance of proving itself worthy. But the humans knew something he didn't. They had a surprise, a secret weapon that was not a weapon at all, but a strategy. At that moment, Blake gave a subtle signal to the officers in the room. Their expressions remained unchanged, but the gears of the plan began to turn. Earth scientists had spent years working on a technology so advanced, it was beyond even the Zorath's wildest imaginations. What the humans had discovered in the ruins of a long-forgotten civilization had the potential to change the balance of power in the galaxy. Vrax's eyes glowed brighter as he saw the humans' preparations. "You cannot hide your weaknesses from me," he said. "I will not be swayed by trickery." Blake didn't respond. Instead, she simply stepped aside, motioning for one of the human engineers to step forward. The engineer, a young woman named Maria, activated a small device that hummed with energy. The device was linked to humanity's most recent discovery, a form of technology that could disrupt the Zoreth's advanced energy fields and weapons. The Zoreth ambassador's eyes widened as the device powered up. It didn't cause an explosion, nor did it send any sort of weaponry at the Zoreth. It was far subtler than that. The device sent a pulse through the room, a frequency that resonated with the Zoreth's technology in ways that no one, not even the humans, could fully understand. The Zoreth's systems began to glitch, and their towering ships in orbit began to flicker in and out of focus. For the first time, the Zoreth felt a tremor of doubt. This was not a simple act of force. It was something far more intricate, a force that struck at the very heart of their superiority. Vrax's confident expression faltered, just for a moment. Humanity's strength was not in brute force, but in its ability to adapt, learn, and overcome. It was a strength born of centuries of struggle, and in that quiet moment, it became clear. Humanity was not a race to be dismissed. The Zoreth would have to learn it the hard way. The humans had proven one thing. Their survival was not based on what others believed. It was based on their unyielding belief in themselves. The galaxy was about to see just how far that belief would take them. As the Zoreth ambassador, Vrax, returned to his ship, the realization slowly dawned on him. The humans had done something unexpected. Their technology was not only powerful but seemed to be built on principles that the Zoreth had never encountered before. It wasn't brute force, but a deeper kind of strength that the Zoreth had overlooked. Vrax couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. What kind of species didn't rely solely on overwhelming firepower to get by? Back on Earth, General Cassandra Blake gathered with her team. The meeting with the Zoreth had gone better than anyone had anticipated. The humans had proven their resilience, but this was just the beginning. They knew that Vrax and his people would not simply back down. The Zoreth, with their immense technological superiority, had the ability to wipe out entire fleets with a single strike. Earth's defenses were impressive, but humanity could not rely on technology alone. They needed something more. We've shown them that we're not afraid, and that we can stand up to their strength, Blake said, her voice steady as always. But we need to be ready for what comes next. They'll return, and they won't underestimate us again. Her words hung in the air as her officers nodded. They all knew the Zoreth would regroup and retaliate. But what they didn't know was just how much humanity had secretly prepared for this moment. Earth had been laying the groundwork for decades, quietly building a force that could rival the best in the galaxy. It wasn't just about military might. It was about a mindset, a way of thinking that no other species had yet fully embraced. Humanity had faced extinction on their homeworld before, had been tested in ways no one could imagine. They had learned to survive not by fighting with the strength of their bodies or their weapons, but by outthinking their enemies, by working together, and by turning even their weaknesses into strengths. To the Zoreth, survival was a simple matter of strength. They believed in overwhelming force, in conquering without hesitation. But to humanity, survival meant innovation. They were used to finding solutions in the most difficult of circumstances, pushing forward despite the odds. Meanwhile, Vrax had returned to his ship, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the thought that the humans had something hidden. They had not only defended themselves against his fleet, but had done so in a way that defied logic. How could a species so young, so small in comparison to the Zoreth, challenge them in such a manner? The ambassador was used to victory being a straightforward matter: overwhelm, overpower, and dominate. But the humans had found a way to disrupt this method, and it left him questioning everything he knew about them. What is this human strength? Vrax muttered to himself as he stared out into the stars. He turned to his crew, their faces tense as they awaited his orders. Prepare for another strike. We will teach them a lesson they won't forget. On Earth, a new sense of purpose had begun to settle in. The humans knew the Zoreth would return. They didn't have the luxury of time. The Zoreth were a relentless force, and the only way to survive would be to outsmart them again and again. Humanity had to move quickly, and they had to move wisely. In secret research facilities across Earth, scientists and engineers worked around the clock to develop new technologies, using the knowledge they had gained from ancient ruins and their encounters with other alien species. These technologies weren't just weapons. They were tools that would allow humanity to level the playing field in ways the Zorath had never expected. The first breakthrough came from an unlikely source. A group of scientists studying the human genome discovered an ability within humanity's DNA that had never been explored. It wasn't a physical strength that humans lacked. Instead, it was the mind. The human brain had a unique adaptability. It could learn, adapt, and solve problems at an extraordinary rate. It was a mental agility that no other species seemed to possess in the same way. The scientists realized that this was a potential advantage in the war against the Zorath. Humanity's ability to learn and adapt on the fly would give them an edge, but only if they could harness it. They started working on devices that would enhance the human mind, allowing individuals to think faster, solve problems more creatively, and communicate in ways that weren't possible before. It was a game changer. In the meantime, Earth's military forces were training. But this time, it wasn't just about weapons or tactics. It was about mental training. Soldiers were taught to think not just like warriors, but like inventors, problem solvers, and strategists. They were trained to be ready for any challenge, no matter how unexpected. As the Zorath prepared for their next move, the humans were not sitting idly by. They knew that the Zorath would come again, and when they did, the humans would be ready. But this time, they wouldn't just be fighting with their weapons. They would be fighting with their minds, with their ingenuity, and with the strength that had always allowed humanity to survive against all odds. The Zorath were powerful, but they had one fatal flaw. They underestimated their enemies. They believed that strength alone was enough to crush anything in their path. The humans had shown them that strength wasn't just about size or technology. It was about resilience, adaptability, and the ability to never give up, no matter the challenge. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity's true power lay not in their weapons, but in their unshakable will to survive. In the coming days, the humans would show the Zorath that their understanding of strength was fundamentally flawed. The Zorath had underestimated humanity once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. But the humans weren't about to make it easy for them. The Zorath had learned a hard lesson, but their pride would not allow them to back down. The humiliation of being outsmarted by a species they considered insignificant lingered like a bitter taste in their mouths. Vrax, though still confident in his people's strength, could not ignore the nagging thought that perhaps the humans were not as weak as they had assumed. He was determined to wipe the stain of defeat from his record. But the question gnawed at him. How had they done it? How had the humans stood their ground against a force as mighty as the Zorath? For the humans, however, it wasn't about winning a single battle. It was about surviving the long war. General Blake had anticipated the Zorath's response. She knew the Zorath wouldn't retreat for long. Instead, they would gather their forces and return, more determined than ever to crush humanity. This time, however, the humans would be ready. They had no illusions about the Zorath's power, but they also knew that their strength lay in their ability to adapt, to think, and to innovate. In the quiet corners of Earth's most secure research facilities, humanity's brightest minds were hard at work, not only improving their technology, but also preparing a new kind of strategy. They realized that brute force alone would not win the war. What they needed was something that the Zorath had never considered. A new way of thinking, one that didn't rely solely on power or weapons, but on intelligence, creativity, and strategy. In the weeks following the first encounter, humanity had made significant progress. They had unlocked new technologies, harnessing energy from unexpected sources, and creating systems that could counteract the Zorath's weapons. But it wasn't just about technology. Humanity's secret weapon was something far less tangible, but far more powerful: human ingenuity. General Blake, who had long been a strategic genius, had devised a plan that relied on unpredictability. She knew that the Zoreth expected humans to follow a conventional pattern of attack. They were used to enemies who fought in predictable ways, but the humans had learned from their encounters with the Zoreth, adapting at every step. This time, they wouldn't just respond to the Zoreth's moves. They would control the pace of the war. One of the key components of Blake's plan was an alliance with other alien species who had also suffered under the Zoreth's oppressive rule. The humans were not alone in their struggle. Across the galaxy, there were other races, some of which had been subjugated by the Zoreth for centuries, who were eager to see them overthrown. By forming a coalition with these species, humanity could create a network of allies who could assist in ways the Zoreth had never anticipated. "We won't just fight them," Blake had told her council. "We'll make them fight on multiple fronts. We'll disrupt their supply lines, cut off their communication, and weaken their grip on the galaxy." The Zoreth believe they can control everything, but they're about to learn that their reach is not as long as they think. The first part of the plan involved sending small, specialized teams of human soldiers and engineers to the Zoreth's outlying colonies. These teams were equipped with advanced technology, but their real strength lay in their training. The teams weren't just soldiers, they were problem solvers, engineers, and innovators. Their job wasn't just to fight. It was to sabotage, to learn, and to adapt. They would infiltrate the Zoreth's systems, gather intelligence, and weaken their infrastructure from within. Meanwhile, Earth's military forces had been working tirelessly to perfect their new weapons. The humans had developed energy shields that could deflect Zoreth lasers and weapons that could pierce their ships' once impenetrable hulls. But the true advantage lay in the human mind. Soldiers were trained to think not like warriors, but like engineers, constantly looking for ways to turn the tide in their favor. The Zoreth had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and learn. They had dismissed humans as a weak species, incapable of challenging their supremacy. But what the Zoreth didn't understand was that humans didn't see obstacles the same way other species did. Where others saw walls, humans saw opportunities. Every challenge, every defeat, was simply another chance to learn and improve. As the Zoreth began to regroup and prepare for their next assault on Earth, they were unaware of the massive changes that were taking place behind the scenes. The humans weren't just building weapons, they were building a network of intelligence, a galaxy-wide resistance that would strike from within and without. The Zoreth were preparing for an all-out attack on Earth, but they didn't realize that the humans had already shifted the balance of power. General Blake watched the progress unfold with a calmness that only she could possess. She knew the Zoreth would strike soon, but she was ready. The humans weren't just preparing to defend themselves, they were preparing to take the fight to the Zoreth. The next battle wouldn't just be about survival, it would be about showing the galaxy that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. They would teach the Zoreth a lesson in what it truly meant to be strong, not through force, but through the power of ingenuity. "We've only just begun," Blake said quietly, watching as humanity's plan took shape. "The Zoreth think they can crush us. They think they can control us. But what they don't realize is that we're already playing a game they'll never understand." The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's true strength wasn't in their weapons or their technology. It was in their ability to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast their enemies. The Zoreth would soon discover that what they had seen as humanity's weakness was, in fact, their greatest strength. The Zoreth were gathering their forces again, preparing for the next phase of their invasion. Vrax had taken the defeat personally, but he was not one to back down. He had rallied his fleet, and his commanders were preparing for a strike unlike any before. He was determined to show the galaxy that the Zoreth were not to be trifled with. The time for mercy was over. The humans had shown courage, but they would learn the cost of defiance. General Cassandra Blake knew this was coming. She had expected nothing less from the Zoreth. They were a proud species, and pride often led to a thirst for revenge. But what the Zoreth didn't realize was that this time, humanity wasn't simply defending themselves. They were preparing to fight back with everything they had, and their plan was already in motion. The coalition of alien species that humanity had quietly gathered was now in full swing. Representatives from the Kiroks, a species of telepathic beings, had joined the effort, bringing with them advanced mental abilities that allowed them to communicate and coordinate in ways that were unimaginable to the Zorath. The Kiroks had long suffered under Zorath rule, and they were eager to help liberate others. Alongside the Kiroks were the Illyrians, a race of resourceful and strategic thinkers, whose ability to adapt to harsh environments had made them natural allies. The Illyrians had perfected the art of guerrilla warfare, and their experience would prove invaluable when it came time to challenge the Zorath's overwhelming firepower. With these new allies, humanity had transformed their position from being under siege to one of strength. Blake and her team had spent weeks preparing for the worst-case scenario. The Zorath would attack Earth with everything they had, but they would soon realize that Earth wasn't just a lone planet anymore. It was the center of a new alliance. This new coalition would strike at the heart of the Zorath Empire, cutting off their power at the source. The Zorath might have the largest fleets, but humanity and their allies had something much more powerful: unity, intelligence, and the willingness to fight for their freedom. "I think it's time we show them what we're made of," General Blake said as she stood before the War Council. The room was filled with commanders from across Earth, as well as representatives from the Kiroks and Illyrians. Everyone in the room understood what was at stake. "We're not just defending Earth anymore," Blake continued. "We're going to take the fight to them. The Zorath have shown they don't understand us. They believe we're weak. Let's prove them wrong." The plan was simple yet audacious. The humans and their allies had learned a great deal about Zorath technology, and they knew the key to defeating them lay in disrupting their fleet's communication systems. The Zorath's ships were powerful, but they depended heavily on a central command network to coordinate their attacks. If humanity and their allies could sever this connection, they would leave the Zorath fleet in disarray. To do this, a team of human and Illyrian engineers had designed a virus, one that would infiltrate and disable the Zorath's communication systems. It would spread through their fleet like wildfire, leaving their ships isolated and vulnerable. But this was only the first step. While the Zorath were distracted and disorganized, the coalition forces would strike at their key outposts, severing their supply lines and cutting off their reinforcements. The final piece of the plan was the most dangerous one. General Blake knew that the Zorath would retaliate with everything they had, and that meant risking Earth itself. But Blake had faith in humanity and their allies. She knew they were ready to face whatever came their way. As the Zorath fleet prepared to leave their base in orbit around a distant planet, the coalition forces moved into position. The Kiroks had used their telepathic abilities to coordinate the troops, ensuring perfect synchronization across the galaxy. The Illyrians, with their unmatched expertise in sabotage, had planted the virus within the Zorath's communication hub, waiting for the right moment to activate it. On Earth, General Blake stood in the command center, watching the battle unfold on a massive screen. The tension in the air was thick. The Zorath ships were approaching. They would arrive in mere hours, and Blake knew that this would be the moment they had prepared for. "We've got one shot at this," Blake said, her voice calm despite the intensity of the situation. "Once we start, there's no turning back." The human forces were scattered across several key points, some hidden in asteroid fields, others disguised as harmless transport ships. The Zorath would never expect it. But just as Blake had predicted, the Zorath's arrogance was their weakness. They expected a straightforward battle, a show of force that would crush humanity and their allies in an instant. What they didn't realize was that humanity was playing a much larger game. As the first Zorath ships entered the area of the virus's influence, the coalition forces made their move. The virus spread like wildfire through the Zorath's communication systems, disrupting their operations. Zorath ships began to flicker and stall, their once precise maneuvers thrown into chaos. The humans and their allies took full advantage of the confusion, launching coordinated strikes against the Zorath's weak points. Vrax watched in disbelief as his fleet, once a symbol of unmatched power, began to falter. His ships were helpless against the viral attack, and the organized assault by the humans and their allies was causing chaos across their ranks. The Zoreth, for the first time in centuries, were losing control. Vrax's anger boiled over, but he knew it was too late. The Zoreth had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they were paying the price. As Earth's forces and their allies continued to push forward, it was clear that the tide of the war had turned. This was no longer a fight for survival. It was a fight for freedom, and humanity had shown the galaxy that they would never back down, no matter the odds. The Zoreth Empire was crumbling. Vrax, the Zoreth ambassador, had never imagined that such a thing could happen. His fleet, the pride of their entire race, was struggling against the unforeseen might of the human-led coalition. They were more than just survivors. They were warriors, thinkers, and inventors. Humanity had pushed the Zoreth back, and the galaxy was beginning to notice. But Vrax wasn't one to admit defeat easily. His pride demanded victory, and he had one final plan to restore the Zoreth's dominance. If he couldn't crush the humans in the open field, he would make Earth pay in a way they hadn't imagined. He would strike at the heart of their defenses, hoping that a devastating blow would break their spirit. Back on Earth, General Cassandra Blake and her team were fully aware that the Zoreth would not go down without a fight. The damage to their fleet had been significant, but the humans knew Vrax's pride would force him to regroup and strike back with all his power. Time was running out. The coalition forces had delivered a powerful blow to the Zoreth, but the final confrontation was still ahead. Humanity needed to be ready for the worst. "We know the Zoreth won't stop," General Blake said as she gathered with her officers in the war room. "We've weakened their forces, but they're a proud species. Vrax won't give up until he's taken Earth." The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. The humans had dealt a significant blow to the Zoreth, but they couldn't afford to underestimate them. Vrax's fleet, though damaged, was still formidable. The time had come for the final confrontation. This would be humanity's last stand. The plan was clear. The human forces would use everything they had to defend Earth. But this time, it wasn't just about defeating the Zoreth. It was about proving once, and for all that humanity's strength lay in their unity, their intelligence, and their unshakable will to survive. They would fight not just for Earth, but for all the species that had suffered under Zoreth rule. Across the galaxy, the Orcs and Illyrians were mobilizing. The Orcs, with their telepathic abilities, had already established a communication network that allowed the coalition forces to coordinate their movements with incredible precision. The Illyrians had already begun infiltrating the Zoreth's supply lines, sabotaging key resources that would prevent the Zoreth from mounting a full-scale assault. The Zoreth's strength lay in their overwhelming numbers, but the humans and their allies had learned to exploit their weaknesses, and they would do so again. As the final battle loomed, Blake could feel the weight of the moment. This was it, the culmination of everything they had fought for. The Zoreth had underestimated humanity time and again, and now they would see what it meant to challenge a species that could never be broken. The humans would stand their ground, not because they were the strongest, but because they were willing to face anything, no matter the odds. Vrax was preparing his final assault on Earth. His fleet had been reformed, and his commanders were eager for revenge. They had lost too much to the humans, and their pride demanded they make a statement. The Zoreth were a proud people, and they would stop at nothing to regain their position as the most powerful species in the galaxy. But even as he prepared to launch his attack, Vrax could feel a growing unease. The humans had done the impossible before. Could they do it again? His thoughts were interrupted as his fleet assembled, ready to march toward Earth. Vrax steeled himself. This would be the final push. There could be no more mistakes. The humans would either fall, or they would rise up to a power greater than the Zoreth could ever understand. On Earth, the coalition forces were preparing. Humanity's greatest minds had worked together to develop a new weapon, one that could neutralize the Zoreth's powerful ships. It wasn't a weapon of brute force. Instead, it was a device that could disrupt the Zoreth's central command systems, much like the virus used earlier, but on a much larger scale. It was the culmination of all the knowledge humanity had gathered, and it could be the key to winning the war once and for all. The humans knew the Zoreth would come for Earth. It was the center of their new alliance, the symbol of humanity's defiance. The final confrontation would be their greatest test yet. The stakes had never been higher. General Blake stood on the bridge of the command center, watching as her forces prepared. She had spent so many years training for this moment, but now she could feel the weight of the responsibility. Earth's future depended on what happened next. She wasn't just fighting for her people, she was fighting for every species in the galaxy that had been oppressed by the Zoreth. "Prepare for battle," Blake said, her voice unwavering. "We've come this far, and we're not turning back now. The Zoreth may have underestimated us before, but they won't make that mistake again." As Blake's forces took their positions, the final moments before the battle began felt like an eternity. The coalition ships, along with Earth's own military fleet, had taken up defensive positions in the orbit around Earth. The Zoreth would arrive soon, and the humans would be ready. Vrax's fleet emerged from the darkness of space, massive and imposing, but now they faced an enemy that had learned to fight with a strength they couldn't understand. As the first Zoreth ships moved into position, humanity's new weapon activated. The disruption began again, and this time, the Zoreth could feel the effects immediately. Their ships faltered, their communication systems fell silent, and their once perfect coordination collapsed into chaos. The humans and their allies were ready. They attacked with precision and creativity, striking at the heart of the Zoreth's fleet. This battle would determine the fate of Earth, and humanity wasn't about to lose. They had already fought too hard, and now, with the galaxy watching, they would prove once and for all that their greatest strength was their unbreakable spirit. The battle was fierce. Humanity, with their allies, fought with everything they had. Zoreth ships, once a symbol of unstoppable power, now faltered in the face of human ingenuity and unity. The disruption caused by the humans' new weapon had thrown the Zoreth into chaos. Their ships staggered, their communications faltered, and their once imposing fleet was now a broken shadow of its former glory. It was a moment of triumph for the coalition, but General Cassandra Blake knew the war was far from over. In the heart of the battle, Blake watched the chaos unfold. Her eyes never left the screens, her mind calculating each move. The Zoreth were regrouping, and they were beginning to fight back, but they were no longer the unstoppable force they had once been. Their arrogance had cost them dearly. The humans and their allies had learned to turn their weaknesses into strengths, and now the Zoreth were paying the price. "We're not finished yet," Blake said quietly to her officers. "They'll throw everything they have at us. Prepare for their next move." On the Zoreth flagship, Vrax was seething with rage. His fleet had been crippled by the humans' tactics, and every moment that passed brought more destruction to his ships. He had underestimated the humans, and now they were forcing him to fight a battle he had never expected. But he was not ready to admit defeat. He would regroup, he would attack again, and this time he would crush Earth once and for all. "Prepare the last weapon," Vrax ordered, his voice sharp with frustration. "We will end this now." The last weapon was a secret, one Vrax had kept hidden for years. It was the Zoreth's ultimate trump card, a massive energy weapon capable of destroying entire planets with a single shot. Earth, despite its fierce resistance, was still a vulnerable target. Vrax knew that if he could hit the planet with the weapon, humanity's resolve would break. The war would be over, and the Zoreth would be victorious. As the Zoreth flagship began to power up its weapon, Blake's eyes narrowed. She knew something was coming, something dangerous. Her mind raced as she considered the possibilities. The Zoreth had tried every tactic in the book, and now they were pulling out their final card. It was a desperate move, but Blake wasn't going to let them win. Not after everything humanity had fought for. "Activate the defense shields," she ordered. All ships move into formation. The Coalition's forces scrambled to position themselves in the most effective way they could. The Zorath's weapon was powerful, but Blake had a plan. The humans' new shields, designed to withstand the Zorath's energy weapons, were their best chance. But it wasn't just about the shields. The Coalition had to buy time to disable the Zorath's weapon before it could be fired. If they could do that, the tide would turn permanently in their favor. In the heat of the battle, Blake received an urgent message from the Orcs. Their telepathic network had uncovered a critical weakness in the Zorath flagship's weapon. It was vulnerable to a specific frequency, one that the humans had developed after weeks of analysis. If they could hit the weapon with this frequency, it would disable the energy beam before it could reach Earth. "General, we've found a way to stop the weapon." The Orcs ambassador's voice echoed in Blake's mind. "We'll need your ships to move in close to the flagship and hit it with the frequency. It's a long shot, but it's our best hope." Blake nodded without hesitation. She didn't need to think twice. The humans had already done the impossible by surviving the Zorath's assault. Now, they had to do it again. "Prepare for the attack," Blake ordered. "This is our chance." The Coalition forces began to maneuver toward the Zorath flagship, dodging fire and weaving through the remnants of the Zorath fleet. Every moment counted. If they didn't act quickly, the Zorath would fire the weapon, and Earth would be lost. But the humans were not afraid. They had fought this battle for far too long to give up now. As the Coalition forces closed in, the Zorath flagship powered up its weapon, a massive beam of energy gathering at its core. The weapon would be fired in seconds. Blake's heart raced as her ships moved into position. They had one shot at this, and she knew they couldn't afford to fail. "Now," Blake shouted. The Orcs' telepathic network sent the frequency through the air, and a series of energy blasts surged toward the Zorath flagship. The frequency hit the weapon just as the Zorath were about to fire, and in that instant, the massive energy beam sputtered and went dark. The Zorath flagship shuddered as its most powerful weapon was disabled in an instant. Vrax watched in disbelief as the weapon he had placed all his hopes in failed. His fleet was already in chaos, and now his ultimate trump card had been taken away from him. The humans had done it again. They had turned his greatest strength into a weakness. "No," Vrax shouted, his voice filled with rage. "How could this be? How could they stop us?" But it was too late. The humans and their allies had already launched their final assault. The Zorath fleet, now without its most powerful weapon, and still struggling to regain control, was no match for the Coalition's forces. The tide of the battle had shifted. The Zorath were losing, and they knew it. In the skies above Earth, the last remnants of the Zorath fleet were being destroyed. Ships that had once been symbols of fear and power were now being scattered, their mighty weapons rendered useless. Humanity had won. It wasn't just a victory in battle. It was a victory for every species that had suffered under Zorath rule, a victory for those who had believed that the Zorath's cruelty would never end. General Blake stood at the command center, watching as the Zorath fleet was slowly dismantled. It was over. The humans had done it. Against all odds, they had survived. They had fought back, and they had won. And now, the galaxy would know that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. They were no longer the underdogs. They were the beacon of hope for a galaxy that had long been ruled by fear. Blake took a deep breath, her eyes reflecting the calm after the storm. "This is just the beginning," she whispered to herself. "We've shown the galaxy what humanity can do. And we're not done yet." The war was over. The Zorath Empire, once a symbol of fear and tyranny, was no more. Their fleets lay in ruins, their leaders captured or scattered, and their hold over the galaxy was shattered. The humans and their allies had fought back with unmatched courage and unity. General Cassandra Blake stood on Earth's surface, looking up at the stars, knowing the battle had been won, but understanding that the real work was just beginning. The victory had been hard-earned, and the toll was clear. While humanity had triumphed over the Zorath, they had lost much along the way. Cities had been destroyed, families torn apart, and countless lives had been changed forever. But in the midst of the destruction, something new had emerged, something far greater than the war itself. The galaxy had witnessed the power of unity, the strength of cooperation between species that once saw each other as enemies. The humans had led the charge, but the Orcs, Illyrians, and other species had stood with them. This was a new era. It was an era of peace, of rebuilding, and of growth. General Blake stood before a large crowd of representatives from the many species who had fought beside Earth. She could see the exhaustion in their eyes, but also the pride. They had done what many thought impossible. They had freed themselves from the Zoreth's grip. "We've won," Blake began, her voice calm but filled with a sense of accomplishment. "But this victory is not ours alone. It belongs to every species that stood by us, every soul that refused to bow to the Zoreth. We fought together, we suffered together, and now we rebuild together. This is the dawn of a new chapter for all of us." The crowd erupted into applause. The alliance that had come together in the face of such overwhelming odds was no longer a fragile coalition. It was a united front, a symbol of what could be achieved when different species worked together. They had shown the galaxy that unity was their greatest strength, and now they would build a future that reflected those ideals. Blake stepped down from the podium and made her way through the crowd, greeting the various leaders who had fought alongside her. The Orcs ambassador, Elandra, was among the first to approach. "We could not have done this without you, General," Elandra said, her telepathic voice resonating in Blake's mind. "Your leadership inspired us all." Blake smiled warmly. "It was your strength that made this possible. You were the key to breaking the Zoreth's control over their fleet. Without you, we might not have had a chance." The Illyrian commander, Tessa, joined the conversation, and without the humans' ingenuity, we would not have had the tools to defeat them. "This victory is a testament to what we can achieve together." Blake nodded. "This is just the beginning. The war is over, but now we have to build something new. A galaxy where every species is free, where peace is the foundation of our future." The leaders agreed, but there was a lingering concern. The Zoreth were defeated, but their influence was still present across the galaxy. Their outposts, their colonies, and their remaining loyalists were scattered, waiting for a chance to strike again. The galaxy could not fully rest until every trace of the Zoreth's rule was removed. The task of rebuilding would take time, but the foundation had been set. Back on Earth, the people celebrated, but there was no time to waste. Reconstruction efforts were already underway. The people of Earth, inspired by their victory, were determined to restore what had been lost and create a better future for everyone. The damage to Earth's cities was severe, but with the support of their new allies, humanity was determined to rebuild stronger than before. It was a monumental task, but the spirit of cooperation that had won the war was now the driving force behind the rebuilding effort. As Blake stood in the midst of the celebrations, she felt a deep sense of hope. They had achieved the impossible, and now they had the chance to make the universe a better place for everyone. The war had shown the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. It had proven that Earth's people, though small in number, could stand tall against the greatest of challenges. They had faced the Zoreth's cruelty and had come out victorious. But more importantly, they had united species from across the galaxy in a common cause. But even as Blake felt the warmth of victory, she knew that challenges still lay ahead. The Zoreth's defeat was not the end of the struggle. It was the beginning of a new fight. For lasting peace, for rebuilding trust, and for ensuring that no one species would ever dominate another again. The humans and their allies had proven they could overcome great odds, but now they had to prove they could live in peace. In the weeks that followed, Blake worked tirelessly alongside the leaders of the coalition, forming new treaties, strengthening alliances, and ensuring that the galaxy's future would be built on the values of freedom and cooperation. The coalition was growing, with more species joining each day, eager to participate in the rebuilding efforts and to ensure that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. The first steps were difficult. There were still pockets of resistance from Zoreth loyalists, and rebuilding the war-torn planets was a monumental task. But hope was alive in the hearts of the galaxy's people. They had seen what unity could do, and now they were determined to make that unity permanent. General Blake returned to her ship, staring out at the stars, the vastness of space stretching out before her. Earth had survived, and so had the galaxy. The Zoreth were no longer the rulers of the stars. The future belonged to those who believed in the power of cooperation, of unity, and of peace. "We did it," Blake whispered to herself, a sense of pride filling her heart. "Now we build the future." And as the stars twinkled in the endless night, humanity and their allies stood united, ready to create a new era, one where peace would reign and the mistakes of the past would never be forgotten, but always learned from. The light of hope had dawned on the galaxy.